Culture is not designed in a glass office. It is co-created with your team. And as a company culture coach who spent the past 7 years helping startups and small businesses to establish their company culture, in this video, I want to share with you the fundamental elements that will help you build a workplace culture that you really want. First of all, I want to dive into the foundational elements of company culture. These are things that we cannot simply miss, and if we overlook them, it's going to cause us lots of trouble in the long run, and the things that we want to change or evolve are never going to stick. In my opinion, if you can grasp these foundational elements, you are already on your way to a strong workplace culture. To begin with, I want to plant a seed in your mind of how we should approach company culture. And this is how I approach culture with my clients as well. Because too often we're designing cultures in a very top-down way. Either it's senior leaders or top managers designing the culture and coming up with the culture strategy and culture initiatives and then pushing that onto the rest of the team. And this very top-down way never works. This is why so many culture evolutions fail, because the people at the top are not including people at other areas and levels of the business. So what I always do is make sure that we are including everybody within this culture evolution. Co-creation is what this is called. So making sure that we are co-creating the culture together. This way we get lots of diverse perspectives about the business, about how the company functions, and we're able to work with people to design a better way of working. So before you go into any shifting or changing, remember that it has to be done with people, not to people. The next approach I really want to hammer home, and it's something I repeat consistently in so many of my videos, and that is because I have sat through so many presentations of culture strategies and culture initiatives with these year-long ideas, and essentially they never work. And that is because we are thinking way too broad, way too big. And actually what we want to be thinking about is what is one small thing that we can do over the next 3 months. So this is what we often call a sprint. It's very much known in the agile world, but it's also a fantastic approach for culture because culture is very complex. We as human beings are complex, which means we really need to test the waters and adjust and keep experimenting and reiterating until we find something that really works. So having these big culture strategies and culture initiatives is way too overwhelming. We want to just take one small thing at a time. As they say, don't try to change everything all at once. I feel like this is a really obvious point to make, but leaders have to be on board with a culture evolution or a culture change, because truly it all ripples out from them. And if they're not going to be involved, if they're not going to support the culture, then any work that you do, whether it's within your team or within a bigger company, it really isn't going to stick, because while you're all really trying to change things and evolve things, that person can massively be influencing how people are showing up. So leaders have to be on board. That doesn't mean to say that you can still make changes within your smaller team, like within your micro team, within a team that you manage, but it just means that you are going to become almost like a heat shield to the rest of the organization. And I've had lots of coaching conversations with managers who are in this position, who are creating a really good positive culture within their team, but then are really struggling and getting stressed out by the fact that they are essentially buffering all of the other negative culture influences from the wider organization. So that can be incredibly stressful. And it doesn't mean to say that there are not examples of where companies have changed from the bottom up, but these are very rare and it takes an awful lot of energy and dedication. The next foundational element is one that I see missed probably the most often, because when we think about culture, we're often looking at the tangible areas of our workplaces, things that we can really see. But actually, what I like to do with a lot of my clients is to get down to the mindset level. So you probably heard of mindset if you do a lot of personal growth or self-development, that we all have a mindset, a belief system that influences our actions and behaviors. But as a collective, we also have a collective mindset. There is a reason why we act and behave in certain ways as groups, because we have a belief or assumption about something. So I really like to work with teams to go that bit deeper to understand what mindset, what beliefs are driving some of the things that are happening within their culture. And this is where we can really start to shift things. So what I always say to people is to really gather either your team or people together to understand what are some of the day-to-day things that you do, and what do you believe is the belief or the assumption that is driving that habit or behavior. Mindset work isn't easy. It feels quite uncomfortable, and it can also feel a little bit icky because we are making assumptions about thoughts, obviously. So what we have to really do is come at it with a lot of empathy and compassion, and be able to have a safe space that we can work together to really understand what is driving some of these habits and behaviors and actions within the collective environment. A real classic example that I have seen lots of iterations in different companies is where we have some kind of habit or ritual that essentially says to people that I don't trust you. So that could be something as small as signing stationery out of a stationery cupboard, not being able to just go and get the stationery that you need. So this is a really small habit or ritual that's been put in place because essentially what it says to people is, I don't trust you. I believe that you're going to steal this stationery if you're not watched and if you're not documented. So it's small habits, rituals, and processes like that that we're really trying to unpick, because this is where the real change happens. If we can identify why we are doing these things, what's really driving it underneath, we can start to think of, okay, what could we do differently if we really trusted each other? The final piece in my foundational elements of company culture is psychological safety. This is commonly spoken about in the realm of company culture because it truly is so important. We can't really do any other work without having psychological safety, this real sense of trust. And if you haven't heard of psychological safety before, I would highly recommend that you go and read the work of Dr. Amy Edmondson. But essentially, psychological safety is the feeling and the belief that if you speak up about absolutely anything within your organization, you are not going to be shamed, blamed, judged, or criticized. You feel completely comfortable showing up as you are, being able to say what you need to without any fear of criticism. Now, obviously, if we are working on change and evolution, we need people to speak up. We need people to challenge the status quo. And if they don't feel comfortable in doing that, then nothing is ever going to change. So absolutely, we have to work on psychological safety. We now have those foundational elements in place. So before you move on to any more of these culture elements, I cannot reiterate enough how much you should really make sure that those foundations are in place. So making sure that leadership on board, making sure that you've thought about mindsets and collective mindsets and how they're shaping your actions and behaviors, making sure you're doing this with people, not to people, choosing something small to experiment with first, and of course, psychological safety. So just like building a house, we need this strong foundation in place before we start building on all of the other elements. People will often say to me, Lizzie, where do we start first? And I will always say it's really important to make sure those foundational elements are set in place before you work on any more of these areas. So this really helps us to have what we often call fertile ground, so that any seeds that we plant is going to really thrive and be nourished within the culture that we're establishing. Values and behaviours is a common place for many organisations to start their culture evolution. And if you do want to do a workshop with your team on establishing values and behaviours, I have created my entire workshop video, which I will link here, so that you can go and do that with your team. Because essentially your values and behaviours are going to shine a light on all the other areas of your culture. I like to say it's a bit like a filter. Once we have our values and we know what we truly believe in and we want to make sure is integrated into all of the culture, everything has to go through this funnel, this filter, this values filter, in order for us to make sure that we are truly values driven in what we're doing. Values should also be operational, not aspirational. And what this means is, are those values true to the culture and the team and how we do things or how we want to do things? Aspirational is very easy to do when we're creating values. I see this all the time with brands coming out with these massive jargon-filled values and behaviors, but are they really acting in that way? And so this is why I am very fussy with my clients about operational values. Are these things that we can teach, train, and show very clear examples of? It might be unusual to talk about organizational structures within the context of company culture, but I don't feel like it is, because structures influence culture. The way we design our teams, the way we design how we work, ultimately influences how we interact and how we do things. So when you look at your organizational design, are you quite hierarchical? And how is this playing out and influencing people's behaviors and the way that you're creating your culture? Or is it quite decentralized and organic and agile, and people are able to move and cooperate much more effectively? Structures will have an influence on your culture, so be very cautious of this when you are looking to build and evolve your own culture. Communication and alignment is the next element, and this for me is about, are we all aligned, working towards the same goal? Do we all know what mission we're on together? And do we have the information we need in order to be most effective? Too often, especially when it comes to information in cultures, it's hoarded and used as a currency for power, when actually we want as much transparency as possible in the context of our work, so that we can get things done without always having to be siloed and slowed down in seeking information. So for me, communication and alignment is fundamental if we actually want to be effective. The next piece of the puzzle is learning and development. And for those of you who have watched this channel for a long time, you will know I'm really passionate about learning and development. But what I always say is learning and development shouldn't come from a management manual. It should be super personalized. It should be something people want to work on, not feel like they have to go through a tick box exercise. And learning and development shouldn't just be about the individual, it should also be encompassed into the company culture. So how often do you have learning moments, entrepreneurial activities, so that you can do things that are innovating and creating within your organization? Recruitment and onboarding is all about how you bring people into your company culture. And if you want to build a company culture that you're really proud of and is a great place to work, then you have to think differently about recruitment and onboarding. I feel like recruitment has kind of become this industry of like second-hand car salespeople, you know, but like back in the 80s when it was a little bit like they're just going all out just to get your cash. I feel like, and this is a very strong opinion, I feel like that's where recruitment agencies have started to go down. They just care about the cash, not so much the people. And for me, I'm really passionate about making sure that companies are recruiting with a very much intentional approach to recruitment. Like, where do you want to source people from? What's the personality? Because let's like move qualifications over for a minute, because you know, yes, qualifications are important for specific job roles, but actually it's the person. We really want to bring in people who are going to contribute to the company culture. And then the onboarding. How are you going to make people have that sense of belonging within your company culture? Not just like a half day morning, here's your desk, here's the kitchen, crack on kind of situation. It's really making sure that you are bringing them on the journey with you, getting to know people. A piece of the culture puzzle that often gets under my skin is performance, because let's be honest, this is the piece of culture that a lot of organizations try to focus on in order to motivate and engage people. They think, the bigger the reward and the most severe the punishment, the much better they're going to perform, because we're like dangling the carrot over here and whipping them with the stick over here. But this is a very outdated way of thinking about performance. And truly, performance is very broken. We have these horrible appraisals that nobody enjoys, that does nothing for performance. And also we have this sense that people need to constantly have some kind of reward in order to be motivated. It's a very outdated belief. Instead, what we really want to do is hone in on that intrinsic motivation, the thing that really drives people. And if you really want to get super sciencey on all of this stuff, I would highly recommend the book Drive by Dan Pink, because he goes into all of the science and research around motivation. But really what we want to be doing is tapping into that intrinsic motivation, developing systems that not only look at individual performance, but also team performance as well. I add pay and benefits into the culture ecosystem because I believe these two things really reinforce your values. Because let's face it, nothing quite says what you value until you put your money where your mouth is. Benefits can be added work perks that help support particular values. So for example, if you really are like eco-friendly and you want to be doing more for the environment, then are you offering things where people can have volunteer days, as an example? Also, when it comes to pay, another way to think about this is around your values. A lot of organizations have the value of transparency, yet aren't transparent with their pay scales. You see what I mean? So again, we want to have the values lens looking at pay and benefits to say, are we really values aligned in the way we pay people and the way we offer work perks? Face and place is probably one of the most tangible aspects of company culture because it is the visual, physical things that again reinforce what we believe about how we work together. So this is why so many of these big brands spend a lot of money, a staggering amount of money, on super cool offices, because what they're really doing is reinforcing their values and how they want people to work. So even when it's in a hybrid remote context, all of the tools and apps that we're using are reinforcing the culture and our belief system. And the final piece for me in making sure you're building a culture that you really want is a rhythm. Too often I just see people working on culture as if it's like just the thing that happens every year. We talk about values, we go on an offsite, we do something fun, and then it all just like gets ignored. Rhythm is about the consistent and intentional practice of ensuring that you're always looking at your culture and working together to make those improvements. I say this to all of my clients and they get sick of it, but it's progress over perfection. What can we do better? What can we do differently to make sure that we are always improving and progressing? If you want to learn some practices that are related to any of these elements, I have covered these in my digital course, How to Build the Company Culture You Really Want. So in that course, I go through these elements in much deeper detail and give you resources and practices to try within your company culture so that you can start your own culture experiment. So I've linked these below. But let me know which culture element you feel like you're going to start working on next. And thank you so much for watching.